Okay, we're going to go over mixing this. And the reason you need 2 cups is so you can get the measurement, or you can use 1 if you have markers that you can actually measure, but I don't have them, so I'll use 2 of the identical cups, and in the mixing process. So what we're going to do is we're going to pour the same equal amounts and then pour it over into 1, and we're going to stir it up. And then after we're done with stirring it up, I think about 5-6 minutes, something like that, we're going to pour it over into this. Now I got a piece of granite here that I cut. I use for a mixing rod, and the reason is I like these sharper edges, because as you're mixing, you need to scrape the edges several times every time you do it. Scrape the bottom, so you make sure your cut don't have no. This got little small ridges, but it's nothing real major. But make sure your cut's fairly smooth on the inside so you can get that mix. Because here's what happens is, the biggest problem people are going to have with this is that they don't mix it properly. And when you pour it out and you finish it and everything looking good and you think, oh man, I've got this wet. 3 days from now, you're going to find a little spot somewhere or a couple that just never dried. And that is because the resin was not mixed in properly with the hardener. And it just leaves a tacky spot, and it'll never dry because it's just resin, usually resin or hardener. But that's why it's very important to go ahead and scrape the edges in this cup as you're stirring. Okay, it's take you about 5-6 minutes to stir it up real good, pour it over into this cup, and take you another 5 or 6 minutes and stir it up into this cup. Now when you get all that done, then you're ready to pour it out. Best to stir it by hand. If you, the faster you stir this, the more air you're going to put into the solution. And when you start pouring it out, it's a little harder to get it out. Now, she's going to change colors as you're mixing this. That's not a big deal. And it will have some air. You are going to get some air bubbles in there, but we'll show you how to get them out and how to work this down. Okay? So let's go ahead and just measure this out a little bit. I ain't going to use a lot, or I'm not going to use a lot. But I do have a little area here I want that I'm using to measure with to make sure I get the exact portion in each cup. So we'll do this and we'll start mixing. Of course, I'm not going to film the whole 12 minutes of mixing, but we'll get you the ideal here. Okay, that's good. Now, if you don't have the same cups or something like that, you can go by the bottle. It has little marks right here that you can use as a guide on how much you've used on each. See, when we put these side by side, they're pretty close to being even. So I've got the right amount in there. So after we get that, we'll put these over here to the side, out of the way, and we'll start mixing. Now we're just going to pour this in, just like that. We'll drain it out real good. Some people pour it in the same container. They just measure it out and drop it in. That way you don't have to scrape these edges like this. But this won't hurt because you're going to be putting it back in this cup anyway. Now, don't overfill your cup to where you can't put both of them in the same cup. Okay? You don't want it to overflow. About a ½ inch down on the cup. Mine's right about here right now. Okay, so that'll allow me stirring without creating a lot of mess. Because as you stir it, it will come over the edge. So anyway, we'll just stir this up a little bit. Scrape these edges as I go to make sure this gets mixed up. Scrape the bottom. And then we'll just keep stirring. And then we'll start, once I get this done, we'll pour it over in this cup and we'll do it again. And once we're done, then we'll start laying it out. And it's going to get a little cloudy in here. Like I said, even as stirring it, you're going to put a few air bubbles in there. That's okay. Just don't use any kind of drill. If you had any kind of mixing pile or something like that, you're going to put a tremendous amount of air into this. So we just give you a good little going here. Stir the edges, scrape them edges over, Make sure that resin's off there and the hardener's all mixing together. It takes a little while to do this. It's pretty thick, as you can see, almost like a syrup. But I tell you what, when you use this, it will run in the smallest little crack and cranny that you can find. So if you're using, like I did on the coat rack or something like that, if there's a little crack around there that'll seep through and go to underneath, it'll actually glue your product down to the bench if that happened. So be careful on what you use this on. And if you want to fix rocking chairs or kitchen table chairs, have you ever glued them up and they just not hold? Take some of this, mix up a small portion, and take you some banding straps, put it around the legs to hold them tight, and pour a little bit around each leg. And what that does is this will seep down into that crack. It'll create a permanent bond. I've got chairs I've done for 6 months or almost a year that have never gave away. Regular yellow glue don't do anything for that. Matter of fact, it works so good we can put it on our rocking chairs and they've held fine too. So you'll definitely find a lot of uses for this epoxy. And that's what it is, by the way. It is an epoxy. It's not just for the finish, but it's just an epoxy that dries glassy clear. So I'm going to go ahead and keep stirring this up and we'll shut this off. And when I'm finished and start pouring, we'll come back to you, okay?